So now we've got the previews. Hey everybody, excited to have you here as today we debate whether or not Easter has pagan origins, and we're starting right now. Hey everybody, thrilled to have you here. As mentioned, today we are debating whether or not Easter has pagan origins. And as the holiday approaches, this is going to be especially interesting as we have two gentlemen who have read a lot about these issues, and we're only 1 week away. So with that, want to do the introductions, let you know that everybody's links are down in the description box. So if you're like, oh man, I'm totally dinging Cingeto, he's got some really interesting stuff. Or if you're like, oh, that Mike Jones, he drives me crazy, you can go check out their stuff. You know what? They're going to grow on you. You're going to love them. So same thing with JMD, our moderator. He's here today helping us out, which we totally appreciate as well. And so just want to give each of the speakers maybe like 1 or 2 sentences if they just want to share what they've been up to at their channel or blog. And we are thrilled to have all of you here. And we can actually, JMD, if you're willing to start us off by just mentioning what you've been up to at your channel, we'd be thrilled to hear about it. And just want to remind everybody that JMD and everybody else are linked in the description. So thanks for being here, JMD.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me moderate. So I recently just hit 1K, and I'm planning on doing a 1K subscriber hangout probably next week sometime. And then I want to do just a live Q&A, I think, with a bunch of some famous apologists and maybe some others for 1,000 subscriber special. And then I did Devil's Advocate with Inspiring Philosophy last week. People can check that out. That's the second most recent video. And then I did an interview with Braxton Hunter yesterday. So that's what's been going on there at the moment. So
Excellent. That's rad, man. Congrats on 1K. That's great. And also, Mike Jones from Inspiring Philosophy, glad to have you here. If you want to share what you've been up to at Inspiring Philosophy, we're thrilled to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I have a series coming up on the Old Testament and Genesis starting soon. Basically, all that's going on right now with me, just finished a bunch of series on objections to Christianity and theism. So yeah, it's basically what I've been going on. I have a debate on Capturing Christianity channel coming up next month with David Fitzgerald on dying and rising gods and Jesus' existence. So yeah, that's what's going on right now.
That is awesome, really interesting. We'll try to plug that so the audience gets a reminder about that debate. And very thrilled to have you here. And Cingeto, we're glad to have you. Thanks for coming by just to have this really interesting discussion. If you want to share what you've been up to lately, whether it be reading, writing, particular ideas that you're really interested in, we're glad to have you here, and thanks for coming.
Thank you. Basically, what I've been up to is I don't have a channel yet, but me and some friends are working on some so we can make proper content for about polytheism and things like that at the moment.
You bet. Well, we're glad you're here. And so with that, I'm going to kick it over to JMD. He's going to be our moderator just in case we have any sort of confusion during the dialogue or anything like that. JMD will just kind of say, oh, okay, I think there's a misunderstanding. Anything like that, he will handle. I'll be in the live chat. If anybody has any questions for the speakers, as we'll go about 45 minutes or so of open discussion between the speakers, then we're going to go to the Q&A, and at that point we will read off your questions. And to make them a little bit easier for me to read, if you just started off with @moderndaydebate and then put question for IP or Mike Jones or question for Cingeto, that'll make it a little bit easier as well, and then JMD and I will read those off during the Q&A. So JMD, the floor is yours to get us started on the discussion.
yeah, so whether Easter has pagan origins is, probably an important conversation since, Easter is about the resurrection of Jesus of Nazareth, and whether that has pagan influences, quite the important question, I think. So with that, I open up the discussion to both IP and Ghetto King.
Yeah, I can just state what I basically believe, and then King Ghetto can go into what he says. I won't claim that there are no pagan origins. I just say there's not enough sufficient evidence, or there is no clear evidence of any sort of causation that any tradition in Easter, where it's the egg, the Easter bunny, or the name Easter, can go back to some sort of pagan ancient holiday or whatnot. If there is, I'd like to, if we can discuss it, if there's any sort of evidence that Cingeto has, we can go over. Looking at our early sources as best I can and what scholars say on it, there's not a lot of evidence to suggest that it does have pagan origins.
I hold the opposite view. I do believe that there's evidence that it does have pagan origins. I'm not one to deny that it has Christian origins. That's fairly obvious from what history says. But I also believe specifically Easter, I'm kind of separate Pascha and Easter generally, even though Pascha, that's an argument for a different day. But I do believe that Easter does have pagan origins, and I think there is clearer evidence. We can go over that soon enough. If you have anything, if you have any objections to certain things that I may end up bringing up, I'd like to hear it. But I do believe that there are certain texts and stuff that contribute to it, and other linguistic techniques and things that can show us.
Okay, so why don't we start there? Why don't you go over what text you have?
I'm pretty sure, as you already know, I have the Venerable Bede. That's one that outright says it. I also have you ever heard of the let me see, have you ever heard of the old German high lullaby?
Yeah.
It is still disputed, I'll admit that, but Grimm does hold it in, or Grimm did, he's dead, but Grimm did hold it in high esteem and think that it had there's very good arguments for its authenticity.
Yeah. Well, why don't we start with Bede, because there's a lot of problems when reading Bede. He admits that he sort of is making things up to his own interpretation. I mean, a lot of modern scholars have called him out. I mean, Alexander Tilly directly said he just invented and I quote, imaginary cult. And there was a lot of problems. I mean, he contradicts himself a couple times when trying to do these dates and whatnot. So I'd like to know what does Bede say, and why would that be evidence that Easter has some sort of pagan origin?
What does Bede say specifically? I can go down to, if you want me to read it off.
You can read it from there, and I'll respond, because I was prepared to talk about Bede.
Okay. Well, mostly in his Reckoning of Time, chapter 15, he first goes over March and then who it's named after, and then he goes over the third month, which is April, which and it's named after, is also called Paschal month for the Christian celebration. And then it talks about how it is directly comes from the old celebration of the god Istore, which is also etymologically linked with Ostara, which is the Teutonic god of the continental Germanic tribes, not just the Anglo-Saxons. So he goes over that, and one reason I give to his credit to his authenticity about this specifically is how little he talks about paganism. So why would he make something up just to talk more about paganism when he tries to avoid it in the first place?
That's a good question. The reason why is because he's trying to interpret a lot of things. He's not really specifically talking about paganism so much, but he is talking about alleged pagan festivals, alleged pagan goddesses. So he's talking about it like, beating around the bush, kind of, so to speak. In terms of what he's talking about, though, for example, he talks about the month of February being Sol Manath, which is supposed to mean month of cakes. We're not really sure where he got that from. I mean, Tilly and Ronald Hutton said he basically made it up. Same with the month supposed to come after that, the month of March. He says that's named after a god, Rheta, or a goddess named Rheta, and we don't have any evidence that she existed. And then he follows it with Ostara. And since he's saying he's, making these things to his own interpretation, it seems mostly like he's just looking at certain things and going, well, I think this may have some sort of pagan goddess behind it. I mean, why else would they call it, instead of actually fact-checking and looking for the sources? For example, in that same chapter, he contradicts himself. He opens the chapter by saying, these people calculated their seasons according to the cycles of the moon. And then a couple of sentences later, he starts positing that, oh yeah, they had celebrated this day, like Moderndaydebate, on this specific day according to like a solar calendar. And it's like, well, wait a minute, you said they would calculate according to the month.
That's because they fused together solar and lunar calendars. It happened in Gaul as well. You can see it with the colony calendar. A lot of people fused together. That's how, when Rome influenced, you'd see a lot of fusion of that.
Well, if that's the case, though, we're talking about when pre-Christian Romans have moved up there. And that's what Hutton actually argues, is that a lot of these festivals, like Moderndaydebate, that Bedes bring up, was actually just a paganized version of Mother's Night, which was celebrated on December 25th for the Virgin Mary. So it's that these were sort of like, it's sort of like Loki and Balder, is that they were like the Norse versions of Jesus and Satan.
Yeah.
Well, the same thing happened with something like Moderndaydebate. And so it was sort of like, backwards influencing type thing kind of going on. It was originally a Christian thing that was turned into a pagan thing, and then Bede is talking about it without the actual real origins to it.
And what does Hutton use as backup for his claim, other than it could happen?
With regards to what?
With regards to that it was originally Christian and then paganized.
Well, he starts with Mother's Night. Mother's Night, Modra Niche. It sounds like Mother's Night. And if you go to his actual book called The Reckoning of Time, he basically explains that, or not The Reckoning of Time, sorry, The Stations of the Sun is his book. So he basically explains that, there is no other mentions of these sources. There's no other mentions of these alleged holidays. Bede admits he's making things up to his own interpretation. So it seems as though that the only thing associated on Mother's Night, like, for example, December 25th, is Virgin Mary. So that seems to be most likely where it's come from. That's what Alexander Tilly says. That's what Hutton says. It just seems like that's the most likely explanation, considering Bede is not really investigating a lot of this stuff. He's just sort of inventing things based on his own interpretation.
Well, that's an interpretation of what he said that you taking that he interpreted it. But it's fun chain. But well, how would you say if it? What would you say if it etymologically corroborated with another month that was written down? Reckoning of Time was written in 900 AD, right, or 800? Okay,
700, I think, is around that day. Yeah.
Well, the Frankish scholar, I cannot find his name. There's a Frankish scholar who also recorded the name of a month, and Germans still call it to this day. It's Ostarmenoth, which would also be relating to us, etymologically linked. If you want to know about how they're linked, they both go back to Proto-Germanic, and they both basically mean east, and they also mean shining, which is also referring to sort of, how the sun rises and stuff and sets and things like that, going back through death.
Months actually. I don't doubt that these months actually existed. I think what Bede did is he heard these months and he tried to posit where they came from, and he posited goddesses like Rheda or Astara, and that's the problem. That was the connection. No one doubted that Hutton and Tilly don't doubt that these months existed, that these were actually the names of the month. They're doubting that their actual origin. Ostara just means like month of the opening. So what Hutton has a pretty good explanation. What he thinks Bede is doing is he's trying to do more Roman syncretism. He's positing a goddess named Ostara based on a dawn goddess that you see in Greek cultures, Eos, or in Roman mythology, Aurora. And he's saying, well, it's the month of the opening. Maybe it's also dawn. And the Roman goddess Aurora is also Eos. So maybe they had a version of Eos in them. And so it's just like it seems like there's a lot of conjecture based on Bede and not actual evidence.
So why would it corroborate so well with what the Frankish scholar put down as well, then?
Well, I agree that the month existed. I'm doubting the actual...
I'm talking about the goddess origin, too, about the Frankish scholar. Like,
what goddess?
I have to find him. It starts with an E. He was Charlemagne. It's in my notes. But
the goddess Ostara?
And Ostarmenoth, when it comes to... There's Istarmenoth, and there's Ostarmenoth.
I mean... he doesn't mention Ostara. Only Bede is the one to ever mention this alleged Ostara. The month, again, we know the month was really the name of an actual month. It's the questioning on, was it actually based on a goddess, or was it just meant the month of the opening?
Well, it could mean the month of the opening and still be based off of a goddess.
It could, but this goes back to my original point. It's all conjecture, because we have Bede who's admitting he's making these up to his own interpretation. He's contradicting himself in these places, in the Reckoning of Time, in numerous places. So, this is why Tilly just outright says, "You've invented an imaginary cult." So it's not like they don't have good reasons for doubting him. He's interpreting things based on what he sees. He's not actually fact checking.
And so the corroboration with the Frankish one is just coincidence then?
Well, what's
or it's
the
just
Frankish
based...
one say?
I'm trying to find it. I cannot find it at the moment.
Because if I remember correctly, and I don't have the source in front of me either, but he's just mentioning the name of the month. And that's what we accept. Everyone accepts that there was a month named Ostara, and that's where the term Easter comes from. But interestingly enough, up until about the year 1038, the Festival of the Nativity in Anglo-Saxon territories was called the Festival of Midwinter in their language. They didn't name, but that doesn't mean there was actually a goddess that goes back. And then Easter was just, the month of the opening, or based on the month that it fell upon it. And same what they did with Midwinter, is with the Feast of Nativity. They just started calling it the Feast of Midwinter.
Oh yeah, and there's one more thing. But do you accept that Ostara and Istre are etymologically linked, though?
Ostara and what?
Eostre and Ostara, Easter and Ostra.
German? Yeah,
They're both etymologically linked.
Yeah.
Okay, then do you also accept that they're also etymologically linked to Austria, the Proto-Germanic goddess?
I'm not really sure, because again, all we basically have is Bede.
Well, this isn't about Bede. This is about the Proto-Germanic.
Okay, so what goddess are you talking about?
It's the Proto-Germanic one of Astro.
Astro?
Astro, Austro, and then it comes from the Proto-Indo-European goddess Jesus, which is a rising goddess, which you can see in multiple other religions, from spring forth from Proto-Indo-European religion.
What sources mention that? Because Astro is just like a prefix. I mean, I'm not sure what you actually mean.
Well, that's what you do with the linguistics, is you go back and try to reconstruct the old words that they'd use based off of similarities between the words.
Yeah, I'm fully aware of that, but I mean, is there actually what goddess are you talking about? Is what I'm asking.
Is there a connection?
No, I'm asking what goddess, what pre-Germanic goddess are you talking about?
The Proto-Indo-European one?
Yeah.
It relates.
What?
1 second. I have to scrolling. I'm going through this my notes real quick, trying to find the second. All right, it goes back to Jesus.
Yeah, I mean, but anything like Proto-Indo-European, I mean, we're talking about cultures that didn't really leave writings behind, so they're not going to mention the name of a goddess or anything like that.
Well, no, it's not. I'm not claiming it to be the exact word they use, but it's the reconstructed one from the similarities between the other words and the mythologies.
But there would have to actually be a goddess there, and the argument that Hutton and Tilly make is that there wasn't no goddess. It was Bede imposing later Greek goddess Eos onto a different culture.
That's not. I mean, you can claim that, but I could say the exact same similarities between it result from Proto-Indo-European as well. So
exactly, and that's my point, though. It's we're entering like a really deep realm of speculation, and if that's all we really got, we don't really have any solid evidence that there really was some sort of early goddess, or there's not a lot of strong evidence that there was, let alone there was a festival that fell around the time of Easter.
Oh, you want the evidence for the goddess? For her? There's an inscription that is linked to Ostar. It's called Metrone Aestrehene, if I'm pronouncing it right. If you know about that one?
Yeah, it's what I believe Jacob Grimm brings it up, correct?
Yes, he did the linguistics of the feminine version of Austria the Dwarf, which also has the same similar names, meaning a shining, relating to the dawn, and then east as well, which they all connect to. Ostar and Oestre.
That inscription doesn't really specifically say it definitely is a goddess. It's just like a linguistic.
Oh, those are goddesses. Yes, they are, because the Matrone were goddesses throughout Gaul and German and the Germanic tribes. They were definitely. You can see by the symbolism.
When Grimm mentioned that inscription, I mean, he kind of was like the only one at the time, but since then a lot of people have called into question this translation and what it's actually saying, because again, it's really speculative. We're talking about things for which we have very little evidence for, little writings left before.
Of the Matrone?
I don't really think he's actually talking about a goddess in that inscription.
Of the Matrone?
Yeah.
Are you asking whether or not the Matrone were goddesses?
Well, no, I'm talking about...
There were statues all over Gaul and stuff that were known as goddesses.
Yeah, but I mean, go back to the actual inscription that allegedly mentions Ostara. Okay, so that comes from Jacob Grimm. Jacob Grimm is basically translating based on what he thinks he knows what the original language would have been, based on later linguistic things, kind of like what we're kind of doing now, trying to trace back linguistics. He was trying to do very similar things, and it was basing a lot of that on really far speculative ideas and whatnot. It wasn't so much based on actual hard concrete evidence, like when we're reading Egyptian inscriptions or Sumerian inscriptions, where we can actually understand the cuneiform or the hieroglyphs. He's basically saying, well, it kind of sounds like this. Maybe that's what it's coming from. It's not really based on hard data or anything like that.
So the corroboration with all those, and the Austria the Dwarf, which is mentioned by Snorri, and the corroboration with all the names meaning east and shining is still coincidence? Because I'm still trying to get at this, that it can't be inferred based off what we already know about the feminine version of Austri and things like that. So it's all coincidence. Or
No, what basically Ostara Month means is month of the opening. So they can talk about things like of the dawn, but I mean, like, here's one of the issues is that, like, just because, like, Spanish and English share root romantic origins doesn't mean you're gonna have everything lining up perfectly. And so when people try to do these language reconstruction things, it's very, very speculative type of work. I mean, they're trying to, like, connect things for which we just don't have any direct evidence for, based on just word association and sounding. I mean, no one doubts that they had a word for dawn, they had a word for opening, they had a word for the Ostara Month, their month. The question of there was ever really a goddess behind it, and based on later Germanic type ideas of what gods, what we see in like the Norse mythology, we don't see any parallels.
Oh yeah,
so
we do.
Speculative comes from.
We do. Austri and was Freya.
Freya, but Freya's not Ostara. So
No,
it's
but
like,
she has a lot of similarities to her.
well, yeah, you have similarities.
That's important. That's usually what you see within these religions is similarities. They will change based off of the different folk traditions that go into it, but they're still similar, very similar. But Austria is still etymologically linked. Just because they sound similar doesn't, like, I don't see how that isn't a good indicator that they're closely related.
But you can have similarities in goddesses or gods regardless. I mean, people try to do this with like Isis and Inanna, or Isis and Ishtar, and really they're based on completely different cultures. People are just trying to find patterns wherever they can.
The Germanics aren't completely different cultures, though.
Well, I mean, with Freya, though, I mean, we're just there's no linguistic similarity between Ostara and Freya. Now, the other one you mentioned, I believe, is a dwarf, correct?
Mm-hmm. Also,
Okay,
the spirit of the rising sun.
Yeah, well, see, but this is a dwarf that's in a different culture, and if there was actually a goddess there, I mean, we would need to see some more Hart Creek evidence other than just connections. We would expect it to be kind of similar to the term for dawn, but if all we have in the Germanic ideas is just the dawn itself, we need an actual evidence there was a goddess behind the dawn. That's my basic.
And that's where the Matroni Aristarene comes in as the inscription. Like,
Yeah,
all right, but when it comes, huh? I can't hear you. What?
But that's just basically talking about what, I mean, a lot of Lego scholars think about is just talking about the dawn, not necessarily any worship going on there.
With the Matria Ostirone, well, that was an inscription of a goddess. Unless, I mean, you said there's flaws from Jacob. You said it was flawedly translated from Jacob Grimm. Well, what have the other scholars translated as, or what have they pointed out that is the flaws within it? Like, what's the flaws within how he translated the inscription? Because we know that those statues and things found all over Gaul and Germanic tribes were called matrones or matries, and we know that they were goddesses worshipped. And matroni Osiremi, that would mean that it would be, at the very least, it is a goddess, and it has etymologically linked to Ostri, which is also etymologically linked by meaning east, and the sunrise, both all connecting to Ostara, which would also connect to Easter. Does that make sense?
We'll say that again. Sorry, I think you're breaking up a little bit. It may have been me.
Okay, I'm sorry. If we have hard evidence with the Matrone Asirane, which would be the inscription, and we know that matries in general were local goddesses in Gaul and in the Germanic tribes, and we know that Ostri would also relate to Ostri the dwarf. It would just be a feminized version, and we also know that they all etymologically connect to be, what do you call them? Etymologically connect to mean east and to mean the dawn. So why isn't that taken as hard evidence? Like, what have the scholars that you've seen cited about Jacob Grimm's interpretation that shows it to be flawed inscription, or shows how he translated the inscription to not be accurate?
Well, the inscription for itself is very fragmented, is what we basically have, and it could just be talking about a proper name. I mean, I think it has like 3 or 4 lines, and it's also mentioned in terms of a Roman inscription. I believe it mentions like Marcus Antoninus Sentius for him and gladly deserving. So it's like, what's kind of going on here? We don't really have enough evidence surrounding it to really infer this idea of a goddess behind it, because it doesn't actually line up with Ostara. It's another kind of like different language, different sort of connection type thing. So what scholars look at this and they just simply say, is what I've said, is that there's simply insufficient evidence to say this is actually about a goddess in and of itself, because it's just so fragmented and it's left alone by itself.
Yes, but you can corroborate it with other matrices found all over the Germanic tribes, and they are relating to goddesses. So why would, and if Austria connects to that and also connects to these months which profess to be named after goddesses, why doesn't that contribute to evidence in that side of that?
Well, what other ones would you be talking about then?
The other matrices, there's lots of them. I mean, you have to pull up pictures, but there's plenty of statues. Generally, they have there's two older women standing. Usually, they'll have circular crests that look kind of like afros on their heads, and then there'll be a younger woman.
That's only meant specifically for Ostara, though.
Well, this is the one I'm talking about for Ostara. I'm just saying that the matrices in general were also goddesses, and they're thought by scholars to be goddesses.
Yeah. Well, so here's the problem: the interpretation of Ostara is problematic. It ends in Henea.
Mm-hmm.
Which, it's found in a number of other matrons, which is part of the name. But in the case of, Austria, it's associated either with the name of a tribe or with a local town or the place itself. So it doesn't necessarily be associated with a goddess. And this comes from Nomi Beck. So what's his thing called?
There were tribes named after goddesses.
Well, the goddess in he wrote a thing called Goddess in Celtic Religion called a mythology, a comparative study of ancient Ireland, Britain, and Gaul. Mm-hmm. Okay, so he's basically arguing that this is a problematic name in and of itself. It could be referring to the name of a tribe. It could be referring to the name of a cult. And they would go back to the same beat. If it was named after a goddess, it's possible. But we don't have any direct evidence of that other than outside of these fragmented ideas that people are making conjectures on. And that's kind of the same thing as what I've been stating. It's conjectures at the best.
So what kind of source would you like that? Because almost every source that I can think of when it relates to general history is generally conjecture. When you look at historical sources, what would be the specific qualifications for a source? Would you like a specific person? Like, we already have Bede specifically stating it, and I know you've already said that his what he says is problematic because of other features within his writing. And then I know you've talked about you don't like since the old German High Lullaby is still controversial. And then I talked about the inscription of the goddess, and then I can go into. Would you like evidence of synchronism between the in Britain and in Ireland at a similar time between Christian and other pagan customs to help the point of synchronism becoming more likely and having it more evidence in its favor, because there is other synchronism, especially in Ireland, between Christianity and pagan religions.
Well, we'll go back to the inscription, because you keep saying it definitely is a goddess, and I mean...
Well, if it has matrices in front of it, then that means it's a goddess, because that's what matrices means. It's a mother goddess of the local area.
But that's not what the whole inscription actually says. If it just said, Matriarchs Ostara, you'd be right on. But because it has that ending on the Ostara, it's probably referring to the name of a tribe or a town in of itself.
Well, it could have been... Well, it could have been referring to a goddess of the tribe, but that doesn't exclude it from being mentioning a goddess, because there were tribes that were named after goddesses. And if it still etymologically connects to the dwarf in Snorri's written things, then that means that it is very likely can connect to Ostara and to Eostre, which
there's the thing,
pretty good evidence in the favor. What?
We need actually concrete evidence, because what we already have here is you're saying it could connect to a goddess. And I'm like,
yes, it could. It suggests it does. It could, and it does suggest so.
Yeah, it could, but that's my point. It's all speculative. We don't have any actually hardcore.
What in history isn't speculative?
Well, yeah, I mean, there is a lot. Yeah, but I mean, in comparative to other goddesses, other gods that are named, I mean, yeah, I mean, there's a whole lot more than this alleged one, for which we have such little for. And our best source is Bede, which is just filled with contradictions, filled with a mentioning of his own interpretation. I mean, that's why modern scholars would call him out, though.
You can argue that Bede does have a lot of issues within his text, but if it also syncs up with other texts, like the one from the Frankish scholar, I actually found his name, I lost it again, sorry, but from the Frankish scholar about Germans still use this term today to refer to it. Yeah. I would also cite that.
But I mean, the inscription is clearly talking about a place. I mean, it has the ending, which is Henis, which is just like the Latin version of IUM, which is just a place name ending type thing. So, I mean, if it's talking about a place, that's the problem with Jacob Grimm's ideas. He's inferring a goddess based on the place and not necessarily, the actual. That's why I said it's not really an inscription about a goddess. That was his problem with his interpretation.
Well, interpreting it as a place can just refer to the goddess's place. That doesn't exclude the goddess still.
It could. You're right. It could. I'm not denouncing the possibility, but that's all it is. It's just a possibility, and we need some more data to go on if we're going to have this alleged goddess.
What other data would you like?
Well, I mean, I'd like to see something more. I mean, I give you an example for take President's Day. All right, what do we celebrate President's Day with every year? An annual mattress sale. That does not mean it goes back to some sort of ancient Native American god of dream that we have just sort of taken over to Americanize. Just because you can find like things like that in holidays or these sort of like inscriptions or these types of names or whatnot, that does not necessarily infer there was an actual goddess behind it. I mean, you could think of the same with like just random English names like Washington or Lincoln. That does not mean there were, just because we have towns named after these, it goes back to an actual person, not an actual ancient god or whatnot. So that's the problem with the inscription, is what I'm trying to say.
But in America, using your example, there are places that are named after Native American things and Native American tribes, like the Appalachian Mountains and such. So I could also point to that. So there's evidence to contribute to that. But
because that's not actually named after necessarily gods; those are just named after people. And we
how
don't
does
know
that help your case?
Behind it. Because I mean, if we have something named after a tribe, okay, then we say it's named after the tribe. We don't say, but there's also a Native American spirit behind it that they worshipped, kind of thing.
Yeah, you're right. The Appalachians don't have that, but the inscription has matrices before it, which does mean a goddess. That's the thing.
But the whole inscription itself is talking about a town called the Matrius town and whatnot. So it's not really talking about
town. I don't think it said the Matrice town, but I'll have to look into that. But I'll have to look back at it again, because the Matrice town wouldn't make sense, because Matrice was like a title, like you'd say tribal god would be a title. It wouldn't make sense to say tribal tribe. So saying Matrice town or something, I don't know, that doesn't seem like
normally a pet goddess in Celtic religion, called a mythology, a comparative study of ancient Ireland, Britain, and Gaul. He's talking about the inscription and why we doubt it's really talking about a star. He goes in through the actual linguistics of this really limited inscription and says this is just a town that the Romans had set up. It's not really, there's not a lot of good evidence that there was actually like a goddess worship thing going on behind it.
And also another thing I'd point to that does lend credence to the idea that, or basically to Easter having pagan roots, would be synchronism based off of other things we can cite and we do have direct evidence for.
Okay, like what?
All right, are you familiar with, what's his name? Saint Columba. Are you familiar with Saint Columba?
Yeah, I've not looked at him recently, though.
Huh?
Yeah, a little bit, but not recently.
Okay, well, basically, there's a long story about him. I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's long. There's a long story about him, basically freeing a girl and healing people with a hagstone. Hagstones come from old Celtic sort of healing item. You use them to heal ailments and things like that. And you want to, in a direct source that would go to it, would be Pliny the Elder, who talks about the Druid egg, which is basically a direct link to the hagstone, just a different term for it. That's one There's also stories I actually forgot to add those.
Syncretism. I mean, you can go to Rome right now and see the giant obelisk there. I mean,
huh?
I mean, you could go to the Vatican City and see the giant Egyptian obelisk there.
I'm not talking about an obelisk. I'm talking about the hagstone and using it.
Yeah, but I'm not doubting that there were not syncretisms going on. I never have doubted that. I mean, I can find syncretisms in the Old Testament.
Yes. But my point is, if there's synchronisms going on in other things, then why wouldn't there be synchronisms within Easter? And if there's things to suggest so, like I talked about the inscriptions, you said there's still some doubts. And of course there's doubts. There's doubts about everything in history. But if there's synchronisms happening on in other places, then why wouldn't it also be that synchronisms happen between Easter when it looks so much like it did?
Well, the problem is that there really isn't a lot. I mean, the best we have is Bede saying that this was going on, and that's a very problematic passage considering it has contradictions. I mean, the most likely explanation is it was named after the month because that's what the Anglo-Saxons did. That's why they turned the festival of Nativity and just calling it the Festival of Midwinter. They just call it based on the time of the year it was associated in. That seems to what happened with Easter. It wasn't taking over. I mean, so basically, let me kind of get you where we're going. We've been talking about this whole goddess. If this goddess even existed, that does not even establish that there was a specific festival for her, let alone around the time of Easter that we actually celebrate, or Pascha that we celebrate.
If you want to grant, if the goddess existed, why would there be a month named after her if she wasn't celebrated in that month?
Well, she could have been, but I mean, we're talking about it could have been weeks off. I mean, Easter's not even around, it doesn't even fall in the same time every year. It's based on, the lunar equinox, based on when they thought Passover happened and whatnot. But if there actually was, we don't even have any evidence for any sort of Ostara festival. We have conjectures based on scraps that this goddess even existed, let alone that specific festivals happened. And so, sometimes, the gods would have things named after them. For example, Thursday is named after Thor. That does not mean every Thursday we celebrate Thor. There's ancient pagans that every day of the week they're celebrating Thor. I mean, you got to actually show that these festivals happen. And let me give you an example from Valentine's Day. I was researching that a couple months ago. I mean, people have posited all sorts of different festivals on February 14th, for which we don't have any evidence for. And they're like, well, I mean, if it's there's got to be some festival. The problem is there just wasn't any ancient Roman festival on February 14th. There was one on February 15th. It was about, wolves and pastors and everything, but there was nothing on that date. So if you're going to claim that there really was some sort of ancient pagan festival for a star around this time, we need some sort of evidence. And for the goddess herself, it's still based on conjectures.
All right. Let's see.
Because basically what I'm saying is that if there was a festival for her, and there's another good example, Juno. She was the god, the month June is named after.
Mm-hmm,
there were festivals for her in June, but there were also festivals for her in February and other times of the year. So there were festivals out of her month, there were festivals in her month, there were festivals for some gods in their month and some out of their month. There were some gods that didn't even have festivals, like Cupid. I mean, so there's all these, random things that we got to go on. Just because there's a goddess, if she's even in existence, we need some sort of evidence that she even had a festival, and we can't just posit that there was based on the speculative amount.
Well, it's not just being positive there was; it's still being positive based off of what Bede said. But like you said, you don't trust Bede, so that's the other thing. That's the biggest part of it.
We have good reason not to trust Bede. I mean, I'm just curious.
In certain,
I'm curious about something. I mean, I wouldn't get my theology from a Muslim scholar. If you're a polytheist, I don't know if I really would trust Bede. I mean, he seems to be making up something called moderndaydebate, which is again, Tilly says, an imaginary cult around Mother's Night, which just seems to be about the Virgin Mary.
Well, I don't get my theology from Bede because I'm not Anglo-Saxon, but I wouldn't do that. Period.
But I mean, I wouldn't. I mean, same. I wouldn't trust a Muslim scholar who tell me about what Christians believed at that time. I mean, they were speculating based on what they were.
I mean, yeah, I'm not personally getting my theology from Bede. I wouldn't do that, but I'm still pointing to that there is a good thing, and I still think that even if I'm willing to grant that there's contradictions in his writings, but it corroborates with the written by the Frankish scholar. How do I pronounce his name? Einhard, Einhard. If you know about him.
No, go ahead. You can go ahead.
Well, but if it corroborates with it, I still think it's reasonable to assume that Easter would come on that day, since it is corroborated, and you can still see this today in German name for April. I still hold to that I think that.
So what does he specifically say, though? I'm confused on what you're getting at.
Einhard names or says that the Frankish says that the Frankish month of April is named Ostermanoth.
Yeah, I agree.
And if that corroborates, then it's very likely that Istore, which is etymologically connected with Ostara, both meaning east and shining, would have been a goddess and would have been celebrated on that day based off of that. The corroboration based off what Bede says.
There's a conjecture jumping. Just because we even name him a month, that doesn't necessarily mean it was based on an actual goddess behind the month. So that's the conjecture. It's like claiming, we need to actually see that. I mean, I no one doubts Bede, he got the name of the month right, just like he didn't get the previous name of the month right. What we doubt is where he got the alleged name from. So when Tilly is calling him out for the alleged month of Solmanoth, or the alleged month of what's the one in between Solmanoth and Ostaramanoth, but he says that one's named after the goddess Rhea, and Tilly and Hutton say, well, there's no evidence that this goddess existed. This is probably more of Bede just inventing things to sort of just explain what he thinks these months came from. That's the issue. So, I mean, he says Solmanoth is based off the whole idea of month of cakes. I mean, the problem is that doesn't really seem to add up with what Solmanoth even meant.
Okay, I mean, I didn't study Solmanoff, but that's interesting. But does Solmanoff have anything corroborating with it that you'd also put it under scrutiny? Does it have any other sources corroborating it with it, like the name for the month that is given by Osarmanoff from the Frankish scholar?
No, but again, I agree with the Frankish scholar. I agree
Okay.
that Bede got the name of the month right. I'm doubting where he says this name came from.
Okay. But and then when I point to the inscription, you also doubt that because it's fragmented. And then
Well, it's not that
when
it's
I
fragmented. It mentions a town, and it's a Roman.
it mentions a town and the matrius, which were known to be goddesses.
Well, I mean, just because there's a matrix in it, I mean, it would have to be saying this goddess, but the whole thing is just the name of a town. So it's, I mean, if you think of like things like, you know, Phoenix, I mean, it would be absurd to say that, oh, this was dedicated to the Phoenix, the great bird mentioned in early Christian and early pagan writings. I mean, we get that name from it, but we didn't name it after a goddess. We named it after an actual like mystical figure, like celebrating that mystical figure. We just kind of like, oh, that's a cool name. We're just gonna, because it's hot, we're gonna associate it with it being hot. I mean, so just because there's some sort of etymological connection there, that does not mean that it was actually named, that Matrios Austriahennis was actually named after a goddess. Like Phoenix wasn't actually named after this mystical creature, like dedicated. Like there's no shrines to Phoenix in the actual city.
That's what a matrice is. That's what the inscription says, but it was a shrine. If you look at it.
Well, I mean that's again conjecture because it doesn't actually say that it's a shrine.
Does it have to say that's a shrine to imply that it's a shrine? Because the other matrices were shrines. Does it have to specifically say it?
Well, we need to know specifically what it was a shrine to, but it's so fragmented we don't even really.
We still have the word matrice in it.
But I mean, again, Nomi Beck is basically looking at the actual linguistics of this and he's going, yeah, I'm not really sure this is really about a goddess here. This could just be an inscription. I mean, of just, you know, town or people in the town. I mean, we find inscriptions all over the ancient world. It doesn't necessarily mean they're of gods or goddesses. Sometimes they're just of people or of like, you know, town centers or whatnot. I mean, so that, again, it's so fragmented, it's so based on conjecture. It's clearly mentioning some sort of town name. I mean, it's like, what are we going on here?
Okay, and JMD also, if you saw them in the chat, he wanted us to go ahead and do questions.
Yeah,
well,
sure.
Alrighty.
I was asking if we're going to go into the Q&A because you guys were talking about 45 minutes to discussion and Q&A.
Oh, sorry, I must have rambled.
No, that was good. I think we'll just agree to disagree.
Yeah, I think so. I still think it's in favor, but I can see why you wouldn't, but I still do think it contributes in favor.
Yeah, and I can give you a source if you want to check out what I was using on.
I would like to see that. I don't think I saw that one when I was going through the stuff, but that's
Yeah, I mean, they go through all of these. They go through we didn't get to the dwarf, but I was going to get to that as well. I mean, because they go over the dwarf here as well, and it's all in this. They say this is all, you know, really just, you know, associations and conjectures. But that's basically their argument.
You got it. So we can go into the question and answer component. I'm going to send these over to JMD, and then we will, as mentioned, alternate between. So for that, I'll just start out reading. We had one super chat came in. Thanks so much for that super chat, Sheepwork. They asked, IP, is Easter a stumbling block to pagan converts?
No, I don't know why it would be. I mean, no, I don't. I think it's more of a stumbling block for fundamentalists that are terrified of anything that they think the devil touched. I mean, oh no, it's called Easter, therefore we have to hide from it, and there's eggs and bunnies associated with it. I don't really know if it's a stumbling block for converts because the focus of Easter is on Christ and His resurrection.
You bet. Thanks so much. And JMD, I'll let you get rolling with the standard questions from the list I just sent. Hopefully you got it.
Yep, I did. So Nick J at Modern Day Debate, question for both. What are your thoughts on Eastern Orthodox celebration of Pascha? As in, what are both of your thoughts as into how and why Eastern Orthodox celebrate Easter on different days? So whoever wants to go first can go first.
I don't really care that much about it. I mean, they just disagreeing regarding dates and whatnot, which is fine. I mean, it's more about what we're celebrating than the actual date. I've engaged. I've gone to some Eastern Orthodox Easter celebrations, or I guess Pascha celebrations, and I enjoyed them. And I don't know what else to say about it.
Is the question just specifically about the dating of it?
It's just thoughts on the celebration of Pascha, and then the different days on how Eastern Orthodox celebrates it on different days.
I know that in like Lithuania and Ukraine, they do a thing. Where is it? It's called. So 1 second. It comes from the same word as salter because it means to write. They do a thing where they put wax in the eggs, and apparently there's evidence of this going pre-Christian, but I didn't go down that rabbit hole because I didn't really. It was called Sanka. If I'm probably pronouncing it terribly wrong, but that's just how I'm anglicizing it. But they do it where they overlay it with wax and basically draw on the eggs, sort of like Easter eggs. And apparently, from what I've read from fragments being found of the shells and stuff, since they're preserved by wax, it dates back to pre-Christian times in Ukraine. But that's all I know.
Gotcha. Thanks so much. And then we just had a super chat. By the way, I forgot to mention super chats. You just put them automatically at the top of the list, and you can make a comment toward one of the debaters during the question and answer as well. Avadia Nirvana said, "This $5 is just because IP is awesome." So it's really nice, really nice of you. Thanks so much. And back to JMD.
Were we alternating between questions, or would that technically be your turn there?
I can actually read the next one, especially because it's Stickman Sam, one of my. Wait, did you already read Stickman Sam's?
No, I read Nick J.
Perfect. Okay, I thought so. Stickman Sam, good to see ya. And he asks, question for Cingeto: would you say that the Jewish holiday of Passover has pagan origins too?
I've heard people make the argument. I wouldn't say so. I'm pretty sure it descends directly from the story of the Exodus. I've celebrated Passover before. I wouldn't say it does, but I mean, some people can make that argument. I've heard it made.
You want to check out this book? He actually argues that the dating and some of the agricultural things with Passover were like we're sort of like trying to like prevent Israelites from celebrating competing festivals at a city called Emer. So Emer had a lot of the same types of festivals, similar traditions around the same year with their festivals. And so this was Moses' way of saying, to prevent the Israelites from engaging in these pagan festivals, let's just line all our festivals up on these days as well. That way they'll prevent it from wanting to partake in these pagan festivals. So there could be some sort of, not so much pagan influence, but sort of like
pagan pressure, peer
pressure, kind of, but more like competition kind of thing going on.
I didn't study for that, so I don't know. Maybe not. I really don't know.
Okay, Phoenix Rising asks, question for IP: why does Jesus die on a different day each year?
Well, because to the early Christians, the actual day was not so much important. They really wanted to keep it around the whole way it's presented in the Gospels, is that Jesus' Last Supper is the Passover meal on Thursday, then he dies on a Friday, and then he resurrects on a Sunday. And so what they basically did, Hutton basically notes that what they basically did is they were looking at when the Passover fell, when they thought the Passover fell, because the Jews kind of disagreed with them, but they thought this is when the Passover was supposed to fall. And they're just going to keep the custom going around the alleged Passover. And so it had to fall on the first full moon following the spring equinox. So that's kind of how they would have it kind of follow, because they were trying to follow the original setup Jesus had, where his Passover meal dies on Friday, the day of preparation, in the grave on the Sabbath, and resurrects on the first day of the week. And it's very important for Jesus to resurrect on Sunday, because there's connections in the book of Revelations where he says, I'm the Alpha and the Omega. That's 1 and 8. He's the beginning, which means he's the beginning and the new beginning. So he's got to rise on the first day of the week. So they wanted to always celebrate the resurrection on the first day of the week.
Gotcha. Just had a super chat come in. Carmel Crunk, thanks so much for your super chat. They said, inspiring philosophy, can you inform people of your primary sources and scholars?
Yeah, absolutely. What I use for like specific traditions, like Easter eggs and whatnot, is a good book called, it's a Dictionary of English Folklore. This is a pretty good book. The Easter book by Francis Weiser, although again, some conjectures in there, some things he gives without sources. So I was a little upset when I got that book. Ronald Hutton's book, The Stations of the Suns, is great. It's a really good book. There's a book by Alexander Tilley called Yule and Christmas, and then Bede, of course, Reckoning of Time, going back pretty early. Those are the primary ones I'm using. I also have, not sure if I remember exactly how to pronounce this, but it's a Latin book from like the 1600s that talks specifically about the origin of Easter eggs. It's by George Frank von Franconier. And basically he just kind of, it's I don't even know how to try to pronounce it, but it's basically a book on medical traditions and whatnot at the time from about 1682 or so.
Gotcha, thanks so much. And then another super chat just came in, Stephen Steen, thanks so much. Or if I remember right, it's Steven Steen. Am I wrong? Sorry about that. He says, can't wait to hear why traditions adopted hundreds of years later retroactively prove Jesus' resurrection accounts a copy. And then, or I think he means a copy, like a copycat, and then in parentheses puts hard eye roll. So
yeah, he's talking about sometimes there were like pagan deities. Like there's a story of Dionysus turning water into wine. Well, that story wasn't written down until hundreds of years after Jesus existed. Everyone tries to claim that, you know, Christianity or Judaism borrowed from Zoroastrianism, but we don't have any documents from them until after Jesus existed. So it's like, oh, they retroactively are copying kind of thing. I get what he's saying.
Gotcha. You bet. And then I'll kick it back to JMD if you're ready. And JMD, I'm going to send another batch of like 4 or 5 questions that have come in since I sent the first batch.
Okay, for Cingeto, will you debate me? Oh, this is from Epic Christ. Will you debate me regarding the Shroud of Turin?
That's vague. Depends on the date, but I mean, what about the Shroud of Turin?
Do you care? Even?
I don't know.
I don't know much about, like, he needs to be more specific. Like, do I believe it exists? Sure. What about it? That's vague. I mean, it depends on the date and all that. I look into it. You might want to DM me.
Well, I have a short video on my channel actually from David Wood. I asked him his thoughts on it. He's like 65 to 65% he thinks it's authentic, and then 35% maybe not. So that's on there if people want to check that out. But okay, another question for IP from the same person. Are there dying and rising gods? That seems like another vague question.
Depends on what we mean. Now, the word dying and rising gods like Tammuz are associated with crops. These are not resurrected deities like you see with Christ. I mean, Christ is really the only resurrected deity. So, I mean, dying and rising is such a vague term in English, but if you go back to the ancient languages, resurrection meant something very specifically. So what we do in our language is we go, oh, dying and rising, well, they're all the same thing, but to them, those were all very different, distinct categories. So there are dying and rising gods. You could look at possibly like anyone associated with the vegetation crops, like Adonis or Tammuz. There were gods that died and then were immortalized, like Asclepius or like Zalmoxis, if Zalmoxis even died. That's also speculative. I mean, but are there any deities like Jesus? No. There are no pre-dying and rising gods that the Christians would have read about. The idea of a resurrection, a resurrected Messiah, was absolutely unheard of to the Jews at the time.
Gotcha. And super chat just came in. Carmel Crunk, thanks so much for your super chat. And they asked for inspiring philosophy again. They asked, can you advise people how long you have been studying holidays and pagan origins?
Oh, about 3 or 4 years. I used to think like everybody else. Yeah, of course they have pagan origins. Everyone knows that. And I was getting annoyed by fundamentalist Christians who says, well, that means we can't worship him because God gets really offended when you put a present under a tree or you hide an Easter egg for a child because, oh man, Jesus is so insecure and mad about that. And so I was like, this is BS. I'm going to make some videos showing why that doesn't matter. And then I started looking into the pagan origins of Christmas. And I'm like, well, there's nothing really here. And then I was like, well, let me check Easter. And it was, I mean, Easter might be the one you got. But I mean, it's, as I was kind of saying tonight, it's very speculative. It's based on a lot of, jumps on very limited data. And so then I was like, well, let me also check Halloween and Valentine's Day. And again, same thing, nothing there. So, I mean, I just started looking at the original sources, trying to find as much as I can. And go from there. So maybe about 2 or 3 years or so, maybe 4. It's been a while. I do on and off research, so I can't really put an exact amount of time on it.
You bet.
Okay, question for both. What is the grammatical nature of the word in question? So, what makes IP think it refers to a town? So, town for context.
Sure. So it's the ending. So like if like so it ends in this like HENIS, which is probably the Germanic form of IUM, which is kind of like podium or coliseum. It's more about a place kind of thing. So it kind of ends like that. And so then the conjecture is, well, maybe it was based off a goddess. But I mean, again, we need to actually show that they named it for this goddess or whatnot, because just because we have a name of something, like, I mean, I remember passing through like random towns that had like really weird names, and your brain immediately wants to go, well, that must be named for something, and it could be, but it could be something pretty simple, just like the name of a people or the name of a tribe, and then they can make the conjecture that that's a goddess there. It's possible. I don't doubt that it's possible, but to actually posit the goddess when so many scholars have called this into question, I would need to see some more evidence, and unfortunately there's none available.
Well, the etymological part of it that would say that it's named after a goddess would be the matres part, which you've seen in multiple inscriptions. You can see, you can look up matres online. You can see tons of altars and stuff to them. That's why I call it a goddess, because that's what matres means. It's referring to a local tribal goddess.
Yeah, and I would just basically say, I mean, it could be, but it could also just be the name of like a town, like, and whatnot.
It could be both. Those don't exclude each other either.
Oh yeah, I agree. It definitely is a town name. There's no doubt about that.
Well, if it says matres, then it's named after a goddess.
Well, I mean, matres is used in a lot of different things and whatnot. I mean, no one doubts that. The question, of course, is what is the actual goddess behind it? Because
it also has an image of a woman on there.
Yeah, I mean,
goddess, so that really contributes to it.
But I mean, again, we have to actually have the name of the goddess with it, and we don't.
Name is apparently if it's a town name, then it's the same as the town name.
Well, if it's possible, but I mean, again, I was looking at Norman Beck's work on this, and that's when there's a lot of good speculation reasons as to why. I mean, you could have like just a town name for like like think of like the movie like City of God or whatnot. I mean, just because it's called that does not actually mean it's named for a specific god or whatnot.
Is it really fair to compare it to modern day things though? Because people in the modern day don't think like they did back then.
Well, I'm just making I'm just using an analogy.
I just don't think it's a fair analogy, at least in my opinion.
Well, I mean, you could be right, but I mean, the problem is we need to know if that actual town name is named after for a specific goddess, or if they're just associating it with the goddess in general type thing.
But what would be the difference between naming it after the goddess and associating it with the goddess in general?
Well, that's what Norman Beck calls into question, is the fact that it's not actually associated. There's actually no name for a goddess here, and so it's a conjecture.
Well, if it says matres, then what else would that mean?
Well, it just means like a mother, like
it's a mother in reference to goddess, mother, and Gallic, which I'm not sure about the Germanic, but since matres is a Gallic word, mother in Gallic would be ma, so it's not.
But it's not addressing an actual goddess. It's like to the mother town type thing, So
to the mother goddess of the town.
Yeah, that's the thing though. But it's saying it's like to the mother. It's basically what he said. It's saying to the mother of the town name. Okay, so
it's stretching.
What are we talking about though? That's the problem.
That's stretching it.
Well, exactly. That's my point though.
Oh, you're like stretching it to say it just says mother is stretching it, because matres references goddesses.
Well, yeah, that's what I mean. It's saying to the goddess of the town is what he's basically saying.
Okay, yes.
The name of the town, though, is what I'm saying. The name of the town, but we don't have to say the goddess that looked over the town, is what he's basically arguing.
That wouldn't exclude though that wouldn't exclude it being etymologically related to Ostara or Istere. So I mean that's kind of a moot point. Okay.
It's highly speculative.
We should go on to the next question.
We did have a super chat just came in. Sheepwork, thanks so much for your super chat. They said, would Jesus celebrate holidays the way that we do?
I mean, he gave wine at a wedding to drunk people. I don't see why he wouldn't like to play games. I mean, what I don't. what are people's view of Jesus? That he's just like this uptight guy that doesn't ever want to do anything? Like,
Guess he's a Puritan. I don't know.
yeah, it's like, why would he care if children were running around finding Easter eggs or putting presents under a tree? I'm not going to say yes or no, but I mean, it's kind of like a little absurd to say that he would be so uptight and would have, engage in like just cultural customs.
You bet. Thank you.
Question for IP. There's a few more here. This is from Ocean, who is also a polytheist.
Oh, yeah.
I do not have the word altar written over my altar. I don't know of any pagan holy place labeled that way in history. Why do you make a demand for a label that wouldn't be expected?
Well, the thing is that, it could be an altar. I mean, I'm not doubting that. Maybe I misspoke earlier. It could be, but it's so speculative because we just have basically the town name kind of thing.
Well, it has the goddess written on it, so that kind of implies.
It doesn't, though. It says town name, and then you're associating the town as if it's actually named after a goddess.
Well, if it has Matres in front of it, then that means goddess. It's like me saying, if it says cousin Ben, well, are you suspecting that Ben isn't someone's cousin because his cousin written right next to it? It could just be like.
But if I wrote a letter, if I wrote an altar, I said to the God of America, does that mean the God is actually named like Amera? That's the problem that Beck is calling into question, though. Is we're jumping the gun on that kind of thing? Is what he's saying.
Gotcha.
Well, does it? Okay, I'll. All right. What's the next question?
Next one was also Ocean. He says, question for Inspiring Philosophy. Place names are the one way that we know where gods were venerated. This is common when culture and religion are intertwined. On what basis are you denying place names in this case?
Okay, well, you have a place name is the problem we're bringing up. You need to actually show there's a goddess behind it. So, like, for example, just take any town like London, or early towns like that. Does not mean there's actually some sort of deity behind that town name. I mean, Rome was named for Romulus, so they worship Romulus there. But think of like Jerusalem, for example. I mean, there's the god behind there is Yahweh.
Well, it does show that it is shown within the inscription that it's named after gods with the word Matres in it.
But it says again, it's like saying, like I said earlier, it's like saying to the God of America. It's like saying to the goddess of this town.
Okay, but does that exclude it from being a goddess?
No, I'm not at all.
There you go. I mean, and if it etymologically,
it definitely was Ostara, and then from there,
that's the etymological link.
It was a pagan festival for her around Easter.
Well, that goes back to Bede, which this is what just helps link it and lend credence to what Bede says in the first place. This is what they're all for.
Well,
they're all intertwined.
You can find patterns. I mean, no one doubts that. The problem is that you basically have one. Here's what we have. You have one inscription to the mother of this town named Austria Hene. I'm probably butchering the pronunciation.
That's fine. I am too.
So saying, okay, so we have a town that's kind of associated possibly with Dawn or whatnot. Then we have Bede, who's, again, admitting that he's making things up to his interpretation, could very well be doing the same thing we're doing. Well, maybe there was a goddess behind this town name, or there's a goddess behind this month name. Yeah, it's possible, but just because there's word association, I mean, for like in Spanish, there's the word gusta. Does not mean it's associated with goose. Or comida. That doesn't mean that means food. It doesn't mean comedy. So
Spanish isn't a direct variation of English. The other thing, like English has certain Spanish elements, but these are Germanic words that do have this. Spanish English aren't a good comparison when it comes to the various Germanic aspects.
Yeah, and I think Ostaramanov is basically associated with dawn, spring.
Just like it's Soromanov.
Yeah.
But and then be right. Okay. You already know my point, so we've already agreed to disagree. So
let me throw you something. So I do agree there could very well be a goddess behind it. My point is that what we have is not enough to make that leap yet, like we would with Freya, like we mentioned earlier. We need a little bit more to actually get us there before we start making these conjectures. And let alone, even if there is a goddess behind it, we don't have evidence there was an actual festival that the Anglo-Saxons kind of merged with Pascha.
Okay, well, if there is a goddess behind it,
then we should get moving to more questions. So I would sum up your argument. Then
let him respond, and then I won't respond again.
I was just gonna say that if there was a goddess, it would lend credence to what Abid said in the first place. But I'll leave it at that. But since it looks like there is, that's why I believe it. But we've already agreed to disagree. So what's the next question?
Super chat just came in. Sheepwork asks, "Is there any holiday we should neglect completely?" And thanks for that super chat, Sheepwork.
Tax day.
I agree. Exactly. I don't know anyone that would. I mean, maybe Carnival because but that's normally celebrated in like Europe. It's not a very American type thing. I mean, but I'm not a really big holiday celebrator as it is. So I mean, like, it's kind of ironic. I have all this research on holidays, and I don't really care about holidays that much. So I don't know. Just don't. It's not so much about what you're celebrating; it's how you're celebrating it, which is what it's important.
You bet.
Interesting. So next question is from One Way. Have you considered? Oh, question for both. Have you considered the Old Testament polemical angle here, where rejection and redaction express disagreement?
What does he mean? Clarify.
I would not know what he means by his question. Maybe it's one of those questions where you have it perfect in your head, but people don't quite understand it.
We could come back to that. We did have a super chat from Carmel Crunk. Thanks so much for your super chat. Again, for inspiring philosophy. They asked, how familiar are you with ancient Near Eastern culture?
A fair amount. I have more books I need to read. I'm going to read Mark Smith soon. I need to finish reading his book, Origins of Monotheism. I'm going to read Karen Najit soon. Another book I have, I think by Mark Chavalis, I think is his name. So I'm researching a lot more right now. But I have a good fair amount. I would hope so.
You got it. Thanks so much. And then thanks so much, Sigifredo Sarabia, for your super chat. Just came in. He said, if Christians who celebrate Easter also celebrate Christmas, why is Jesus involved if Christmas can't figure the correct Passover days or Jesus' birthday?
Well, I mean, Christmas was just kind of set up because they thought Jesus was born on that day, but it's just a day of remembering the incarnation. It doesn't have to get the exact day right. No one really knows when Jesus was born.
It was Sukkot.
What?
It was, from what I remember reading, it was Sukkot because, how he was in the womb for a certain amount of time and then met John the Baptist in the womb and et cetera, et cetera. It's just dating from that.
Yeah, they
and Sukkot, it would be the Jewish festival that it fell on around that time.
Yeah.
Which is in the fall. From what I know. I could be wrong, but that's what I remember reading. If you've ever heard of that.
You bet. And then, JMD, are we on Jay Biefeld's question next?
Yeah, so what hard proof does Jones have of Easter being the time of the death for Jesus?
I don't. I think there was a study a couple years ago on an earthquake that apparently happened around, it would have had to happen around April, around 33 AD or so. I mean, that would be a good evidence as the earthquake study I went over in my Reliability of the New Testament series. But, I mean, it was just around Passover. That's what the New Testament basically argues. So Passover was celebrated around this time. So that's why it would be around this time as well.
You bet. We did a super chat just come in. Sheepwork, thanks for your super chat, who asked, can I revise satanic rituals for Christ?
I mean, no. That you're doing rituals for Satan, but there are no satanic or pagan rituals in Easter. So I don't see what that would have to do with anything. I mean, you can't merge into Christianity worship of Buddha or rituals for Buddha. But I mean, you could find possible similarities, like maybe we both kneel down when we pray. So what? I mean, you can actually show that there's actual pagan rituals or satanic rituals, as you call them, involved in any Easter or Christmas celebration.
You got it.
Okay, so the next question is from Via the Heathen. And question for IP, is there much of history that isn't based on conjecture, especially as far as ancient history goes?
Yeah. I mean, if you look at Egyptian history, there's a lot we have with regards to hieroglyphics in documents that we've gotten from people that we know are very reliable, people like Tacitus or Pliny the Elder or Josephus is actually quite reliable and good. So there is some conjecture. For example, we don't know how like Emperor Charlemagne died or killed it. We don't know how Emperor Charlemagne's brother died. It could have been murder. It could have been natural causes. So historians do make conjectures based on what they think. The same with King Tut. They do make conjectures on that. So there is conjecture involved in history, no doubt. But we need to recognize for what it is. Now, again, I'm not doubting there could not have been a goddess. There very well could have been. I'm just saying that's speculative at best, and we need to recognize for what it is. You can think, well, that's enough to convince me. Fine, but I'm just going to say, could have been, could have, doesn't really matter for what I do or what I'm looking at. But then again, if that goddess even did exist, and this is my biggest part because this is about Easter, that doesn't get us any evidence whatsoever that early Anglo-Saxons had some sort of festival for her around Pascha, and they decided to just merge the two and merge sorts of things.
That's a High German lullaby would.
What's that?
The High German lullaby would get you there, though, pretty well.
Do we have
that? Huh?
What's that then? Do we have time to go over it?
You never heard of the High German lullaby? I thought you said you didn't know about it when I brought it up earlier. It's, yeah.
Oh, wait. Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
No, I don't have time to go over that. Sorry.
I don't think we have time, but that's fine. I just wanted to...
Yeah.
Ask some more questions.
Again, it's
All
a little bit more conjecture at best is what I'm trying to get at.
Okay.
Got a
So, another question for IP. I think the rest are okay. There's one more for Cingeto left, but if you need the word shrine on a shrine, then how is the Church of the Holy? I'm gonna butcher this. SEPOLC
sepulcher.
Sepulcher.
Yeah, I bet. I'm horrible with grammar and stuff. A shrine.
Well, basically, I may have misspoke earlier, but what I was saying is we need a little bit more evidence that it actually was a shrine, because some scholars doubt that it even necessarily was a shrine that was there. So all I was trying to say was it's not actually been proven that it was a shrine. It could have been, but it could not have been. It's so fragmented, there's so little about it, we don't really know at the end of the day. I'm not saying it really has to say shrine on it. I'm just trying to argue that it may not even be one, is what the scholarly debate is about right now.
It's in most likelihood a shrine because of the other ones we have all over Gaul, the other matrices, but yeah.
Got a quick super chat that just came in. They asked, who's Jesus of Nazareth versus Jesus of Bethlehem versus Jesus of Tammuz?
Tammuz?
Tammuz.
Does he mean Tartarus? I don't know.
There is a Jesus of Tammuz.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe technically they said, who's Jesus of Nazareth versus of Bethlehem versus Tammuz. Maybe that makes more sense of it.
I mean, there really isn't a Jesus of Tammuz. There's just one Jesus. There's no connections to Tammuz. I'm not sure what they mean.
Gotcha. And then we just had another super chat. Cheap Work said, God bless you, IP. Got respect for you. See you soon. Zoom. And so I think that was the same gentleman that was asking you some tough questions before. We can.
Okay, another question from Epic Christ. Question to IP. Why do you think the Shroud of Turin is fake?
I never said I thought it was fake. I haven't studied it in depth yet.
Simple enough. Then a question for Cingeto. What do pagan gods do? Very vague question from Ken McCracken.
Which one? Like, there's lots there. You which one? There's plenty. There is Grunos. There is there's Ogmios. There's lots of them, but do a lot of things that, I mean, depends on the one you're asking. You may want to like ask about a specific one and then ask me and I can tell you if I know about the god.
Yeah, that's
I don't. Which one?
Specifics.
You bet.
Unless you want to take all the time to describe what each god you do.
Not going over every single one of them. Would be here all day.
Gotcha.
So, was there another super chat, James?
I don't think so. I think we're... Oh, that was the one that he had said, God bless IP. So I think we can probably close up with this question, because we originally talked about maybe 45 minutes of discussion and then maybe like 25 minutes of Q&A. So this would be a good stopping point.
There is one more question.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
It's from Praise I Am That I Am. My question to IP: is the Trinity a pagan concept? If so, does this affect the way we look at the Trinity?
No, there's no evidence of it being a pagan concept whatsoever.
Which Trinity? It depends on which one you're talking about. I'm not talking. I don't. The traditional Christian one wouldn't, but there are some forms of it that coincide with things like different goddesses. But that's a whole other topic, which is
There
fun.
are groups, of pagan gods in threes, but I mean, specifically the Christian Trinity, you can find it in the Old Testament. You can find it in early Jewish writings.
That's debatable, but I don't really want to get into that.
I've done about 11 videos.
I'll check them out. But okay.
Yeah, I mean, we can. If there's any more questions, we can just move to our closing statements.
Yeah, that was the last question.
Yeah, so just saw Rowan subscribe. Thanks for joining us, Rowan. Glad to have you here. No matter what side you're on, Christian, pagan, atheist, we're happy to have people from all walks of life, and so thanks for being here. And with that, we can jump over. Given that we usually would start with the affirmative, if Cingeto, if you'd like to wrap up. Otherwise, it's really up to the debaters if you guys decide you want to do it in a different order.
If you want to have the last word, I can go.
Your choice. I'm not picky.
I'll let you have the last word. I enjoyed this. I thought it was a good discussion.
I enjoyed it too. Thank you for discussing.
Yeah. I mean, I think we'll disagree to agree. I mean, again, I'm open to the idea there was a goddess named Ostara, just like I'm open to the idea King Tut could have been murdered. But I mean, at the same, I'm not going to. I like to talk about those things, but I mean, it's all speculation at this point. In terms of it being connected to Easter, we still need. We don't even have any evidence for festivals for this goddess if she existed. I mean, the best you have maybe is all this speculation for her is based on, the old German lullaby has been argued to be a forgery by even in the 1800s by people like John Kelly. The inscription has been called into question because it's just mentioning the name of a town. Beat has been called into question. And so when we have all these issues with our alleged sources, it really starts to make people go, okay, well, maybe not. But then from there, we're going to jump to the idea that she has a specific festival around like the equinox. I mean, we don't really have any evidence.
Well, it's not jumping. Okay, sorry, I'll be quiet.
So, yeah, you can respond when you're done. But
okay.
But I mean, where was I? Lost my train of thought. So basically, if this guy's even existed, there's still the best is correlation, not causation. We don't have any connection to any sorts of festivals that the Anglo-Saxons could have merged with Pascha. We have no causation records or causation evidence of any sorts of types of things, because early Anglo-Saxons, when they celebrated Pascha, or as they called it, Easter, it was very Christian. I mean, the games that we associate with now did not come until 1,800 years later or so. I think Easter eggs show up about 1290, and Easter hare shows up in the 1600s, maybe 1500s. So that's why I wouldn't say that Easter doesn't have pagan origins. I just say that there's not a lot of good sufficient evidence to make that kind of claim.
In my opinion, you can, or from what I know, you can nitpick at each of the individual evidences, but I believe that they each add up into making a proper case for Easter, pretty much having being pagan synchronism with original Christians, or the other Christian celebration. I do think a lot of these sources that other people do call into question, but there are scholars who do believe these are legitimate sources, like the lullaby or the old High German lullaby, like the inscriptions of Maitre's goddess and all the other things that they do piece together to make a pretty cohesive case for Isora and the celebration. And I think if Bede was correct about Isora and all that kind of stuff, he's likely correct about them celebrating it in the first place, like he states it in his Reckoning of Time. But if you can look at all these things and piece them together, you can nitpick them, of course, but you can nitpick about anything in history and put it down to conjecture.
You bet. With that, we want to say thanks so much, everybody, for being here. The speakers, this has been a really awesome talk. Not only interesting, but we appreciate that you guys are so civil. Like, you clearly disagree, but nonetheless, true tolerance is disagreeing. Being willing to say the other person is wrong and I'm right, but you know what? We care about each other, we respect each other, we'll at least be kind to each other. So I thought this was excellent, and want to say thanks so much to JMD for helping out. As mentioned, everybody's links are in the description. So hey, convenient right down there, check them out. And want to say again, thanks to everybody for your questions, just for hanging out with us today. We're pleased to have you with us. And so with that, We hope you have a great rest of the Sunday, and then next Sunday we hope you have a great Easter. So take care and keep sifting out the reasonable from the unreasonable. Bye-bye, everybody.